This is the fourth in our series of holidays and the example of Sodom and Gomorrah. And I'm going to ask that you turn to the book of Deuteronomy, and we're going to go back in our illustrations, as I said, I believe in part 3, and pick up just a couple of things with regard to Sodom and Gomorrah and the example of the nation of Israel and the principles that are given to us. Deuteronomy chapter 29, we'll start reading with verse number 23. Before we do, please remember that that's more or less what we've done with all of the principles that we've given. We've looked at holidays, we've looked at unbelievers, we've looked at how they use things like holidays to enter a system of legalism. They become so spiritual during these times, so big-hearted and sentimental and so forth. But we must not be fooled just because it is a certain season of the year, unless they have accepted Christ and unless they are filled with the Holy Spirit. What they are doing is just simply a good work in an attempt to gain God's approval and favor. And of course, we know that we can't do that. We're sinful in and of ourselves. It must be His Son and His system, His means of approach in order to have this approval. So we've gone to Sodom and Gomorrah, and we've seen that it is an example to us. Now, it is a representative model of the whole. And as we saw, there were certain things that happened there collectively. Actually, their homosexuality was not the reason that God brought judgment. It was part of the reason, but it was incidental to the fact that day after day, more of them entered into that sinful state, so that it finally got so bad that there were only a few, we note 3, Lot and 2 of his daughters, that were righteous, and God had to bring that system, the 4 or 5 or more cities of the plain, to an end. And then we saw that it is also a model for imitation. In other words, God is telling us this is what He is going to do, or something similar, to those who, like Sodom, reach a saturation point of evil in the population. Now, He warned Israel here in Deuteronomy, and also we'll look in Isaiah in a moment, with regard to this. Verse 23. The whole land thereof is brimstone and salt and burning, that it is not sown, nor bearing, nor any grass thereof. It's like the overthrow of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, please keep your mind on that word overthrow, because we're going to come back to it, because that's exactly what God did. But it's an overthrow in a very unusual way, as we'll see. But the point we're looking at now is that Sodom and Gomorrah, even though they were unrighteous in a sense, they were not self-righteous, they did have gods. And here it goes on to say, God overthrew in His anger and in His wrath. Even all the nations shall say, wherefore hath the Lord done this unto this land, meaning the land of Canaan? What means the heat of this great anger? These men shall say, because they have forsaken the covenant of the Lord God of their fathers, which He made with them when He brought them out of the land of Egypt. Now, we don't have a covenant, but we still have a grace agreement. God has saved us, and we're not our own. We're bought with a price. And so therefore we have to keep this in mind. There are principles that are applicable. For, it says in verse 26, they went and served other gods and worshiped them, gods whom they knew not. Now that's where we get this point here. Unfamiliar gods. The nations round about them had unfamiliar gods. They went from Egypt, and those gods that were strange or alien or different, because they were children of Abraham. Abraham made with them a covenant. They knew about Jehovah God. They were not ignorant of this God. But they went from the judgment of God upon the gods of Egypt into Canaan land, and what did they start doing? They started to join hands with the nations round about them. Instead of getting them to come over and worship Jehovah, the nations of the world got the Israelites to worship their gods. And that's why it says they're unfamiliar. And it has to do with the word know. Many shall say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not done this? And he's going to say, I never knew you. Literally, I never had an intimate relationship with you. I was never acquainted with you, just name only. We never had a relationship. And so therefore, what God is saying here is that they came in and they were influenced by gods that they didn't know, and they wanted to get to know. And therein is the catch for us. When we enter the holiday seasons, we have to keep in mind that there is one God that we worship, and we approach him through his Son. And we cannot compromise, otherwise we will do what Israel did. And that is go over, and yes, we know about Jehovah, but we'll join hands with those of other religions, other nations, other cultures that have other gods. We're familiar with one. We know God through his Son, Jesus Christ. But we're unfamiliar with the others, and yet we join hands with people in this ecumenical time of year. But now, not only that, note the last part of verse number 26. Gods whom they knew not, and whom. Now, this is an unusual statement. He, meaning the God of the Bible, had not given unto them. They were unassigned gods. I like that. When we come to God, God himself says, okay, here are the gods that you can worship. Here are the gods that are assigned to you. Thou shalt have no other gods before me, period. So any other God is unassigned by God himself. In other words, we just can't go making up gods. We just cannot go worshiping any idol, any demon, making up our own religious system. Why? Because God has not assigned us those gods to worship. They are unassigned deities. And that's what Israel did. They said, okay, well, now God hasn't sanctioned this God, but you say now he's a god of fertility, or she's a goddess of fertility. It'll help my herds and help my crops if I sacrifice to this deity and so forth. It'll help my love life. Well, the fact of the matter is God has not assigned to them that God. And when we come to these holiday seasons, we have to remember that in America, there are atheists, there are agnostics, there are Buddhists, there are Muslims, there are Jews, there are Christians of every shade and brand. Most of these people are demon-influenced religionists. And we have to be careful if we join hands with them. Why? Because we're not familiar with their gods. Those gods don't possess us. Our mind should not be on them. We have not met them personally and intimately like we have the true God through Christ. And we have to keep in mind that God the Father has not assigned us these deities to worship. It's his Son that's preeminent. It's his Son that we should constantly have in mind. Other than that, he takes us back to the overthrow of Sodom and Gomorrah, just like he does here. And we're not doing our family and friends any real favors by compromising with their beliefs and ecumenically joining hands with them. Okay, let's go to Isaiah chapter 3, another principle that we want to pick up. Isaiah chapter 3. Now, please remember that as I'm bringing this, as always, I am not teaching that we should jump up in the air and land on their heads with both feet and stomp them to the ground with what I'm talking about here. We can't do that. However, we must be mindful of our own spirituality, because just as soon as we compromise, we weaken God's system of the pivot. Just as soon as we get out of that circle, we get in the eye of the storm, and we, just like Sodom and Gomorrah, as we saw Sunday night, we begin to add to the problem. We become part of the problem rather than part of the solution. because God is going to recompense evil upon those that are not following Him and those who compromise, and especially those who worship other deities. So we have to be careful. So I'm not saying to stomp on them, get on them, ride their case, yell at them, be mean to them. I'm just saying that graciously guard your own spirituality and try to relate as you can what is wrong with what they are doing. And hopefully it will not bring any hard feelings, but undoubtedly it will. But as long as you approach it the right way, from a heart of love and concern, and look what this might bring upon us if you keep doing it this way. Here in chapter 3 in Isaiah, verse 8 says, Jerusalem's ruined, Judah is fallen, because their tongue and their doings are against the Lord, to provoke the eyes of His glory. Now, His glory has to do with the unity of His attributes. He does not compromise. He will not compromise. He can't do it and still be the God He claims to be. The show of their countenance doth witness against them. They declare their sin as Sodom. In other words, we've been talking about Thanksgiving here. On the one hand, they're just so grateful. But on the other hand, they reject the God of the Bible, the God who gave them life, the God who gave them all these resources to enjoy. So that's hypocritical. And yet they do it unashamedly, unabashedly. I don't care, this is what I'm going to do. They're grateful simply that they have health and strength and food and those particular things, but they're not grateful for the most important thing, knowledge of the Lord and His salvation. It says, they hide it not. Woe unto their soul. Now here is the principle of evil compensation. For they have rewarded evil unto themselves. The best of life apart from God is the definition. And that what they are doing is God is going to say, okay, I'm going to give you life apart from me. The life that you have is only temporary. The blessings that you have are only temporary. They're one day going to end, and you're going to spend the rest of your life, eternal life, in hell forever apart from me. Verse 10, say to the righteous, it will be well with him. They'll eat the fruit of their doings. But woe to the wicked, it shall be ill with him, for the reward of his hands shall be given him. God is going to compensate. And if we dearly care about the people that are in our families and those that are our friends, we need to warn them with regard to what they're doing, because it is accruing to their account as an evil work that they will be judged for eventually. All right. Now we've already discussed these things. Let's move on to something else here. We'll get one of these days in the 21st century, Dan. I don't know when, but we will. Okay, let's look at something else here in 2 Peter chapter 2. 2 Peter chapter 2. I have a friend, and his name is Dick Connor, and he owns the Pit. And he is a Sunday school teacher at a certain church. I've tried to win him over here, but he can't do. His wife doesn't like to come here. They visited a couple times, but because we're doctrinal and it's mainly the religious type deal, she doesn't like it. Very nice person, but what we do here is different than what they do at this particular church. But anyway, Dick is a Sunday school teacher, and I got to telling him that what he needs to do is learn how to get to the original languages and use the layman helps available to dig in and so forth. And he said, well, what value is that? And I said, well, let me show you. Here's something I'm working on. 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse number 7. It says, God delivered just Lot, vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked. For that righteous man dwelling among them, and seeing and hearing, vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. Now, what word is repeated there twice in these two verses? Vexed. Okay? And anyone reading it in the English would say, well, hey, it's the same thing. But the fact of the matter is, it's two different words in the Greek. And if you know these words, it will help you understand what's going on and what Lot did wrong. Now, it says here that Lot was just in verse number 7, and it says that he was righteous in verse number 8. Now, that tells us that he was saved. But the vexing aspect of it, when you get down and bring it out from underneath the surface, tells us that he was also very carnal, and that was his problem. The reason that Sodom and Gomorrah were judged was because the pivot that was there became ineffective, became carnal, could not influence his culture and society with his life. And when that happens, that is our contention, and that is why we're given this warning. If we compromise and become carnal or of the world, then what we're doing actually is bringing judgment not only upon ourselves, but upon those in our periphery that we care about. And so we have to be careful not to be like Lot. We can be in the world. Yes, we can celebrate these holidays within limits, but we cannot be of the world, and we cannot excuse much of what they do without some sort of gracious protest to them and preservation of our own spirituality. So there's the doctrine of double vexing. And it's going to teach you why during the course of the year you get tired, and during the course of the holiday seasons you become depressed and tired, and your mind cannot focus, and you just become so weary and so forth. This happened to Lot. Now, what we're going to teach is that we should not let it affect us like it did Lot. The first vexed is in the Scripture. By the way, the English means agitation, irritation, a mental disquieting, and so forth. But kataponeo in the Greek means to wear down or wear out by hard labor. You see somebody with a ball and chain, and you got a 10-pound sledge, and they're hitting the rocks, and boom, hitting them, and boom, hitting them, and they do that all day long. Well, I guarantee you, by the end of the day, they don't do it as friskily, as briskly as they did at the beginning of the day. Why? Because it is a process of wearing down. It is burdensome, or it is the picture of somebody carrying a heavy load, and you can only go so far before your knees begin to buckle and your legs begin to give out because you're being worn down. Now, in the Greek, this is known as an adjective that is characterizing what is happening to Lot. It's something that is happening to him. He's being vexed by this. It's in the present tense, and so therefore it's something that is an ongoing thing. He wakes up every day, and during his waking hours, he is being vexed. Now, it's in the passive voice. Now, that means that when you have something active, it means you're bringing about the activity. But it's something that's passive, your circumstances or someone else is bearing upon you. And so here he was in these circumstances, and it began to wear him down. My goodness, these people are evil. My goodness, these people are sinful. And every single day, and that's what happens. It happens to us. We've had prayer requests here just a couple of weeks ago, where already, even before Thanksgiving, it was starting to wear on us with people planning their Christmas parties. Had nothing to do with Christ, everything to do with feasting and alcohol and orgies or whatever. But it had nothing to do with the Lord Jesus Christ. And as we began to be sucked into this system, you get weary of it every single day. And that happened to him. Not only that, it is in the participle, and the participle is temporal. In other words, he was wearying himself in time every day, beginning to get worn out with this. I got to ask you the question. This is just December 2nd. Are you worn out with Christmas? I know I am. They started putting up Christmas lights in the middle of November. They started playing Christmas songs clear on September the 2nd or 3rd, whenever it was I heard my first one. Man, it's beginning to wear me down and out. Okay, but now, hopefully, it will not vex me in the second way that it vexed, and I'm using myself as a personal example, vexed me in the second way that it vexed Lot. Let's look at verse 7. God delivered just Lot. He was vexed. He was worn out with the filthy conversation of the wicked. Now, whether it's lusting after sexual gratification, which evidently they reached a point where they could not be satisfied, so they went out for new adventures, new conquering, and so forth. Note what it says in verse 8. For that righteous man dwelling among them in seeing and hearing. Now, here's the second thing, and here's why Lot was wrong. It vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. Now we come to another word, ba-sinitzo. And it means to be examined or tested by a touchstone. Now, especially in ancient days, they would take ore, and they would have a touchstone, and they wanted to see if, say, gold was real. So what they would do was take this and rub it against the touchstone. And it would turn to a certain color, and it would prove its genuineness. And that's what this word means. Now, here is the upshot of it. You had to make contact. But when you make contact, there was a test. As you began rubbing the stone back and forth, the touchstone with this ore, there was a test there. There was friction there. And so that's what is being talked about here. He kept on remaining in Sodom when he should have gotten out long ago. And he was rubbing shoulders, rubbing elbows with these people, and it was testing him rather. And we have this, it's called an iterative imperfect. And when you have an iterative, it describes an action as occurring at successive intervals in time. He was tested. He was tested. He was tested. And as he was tested, he began to compromise. He began to excuse it. He began to let it go. Oh, it doesn't matter. Why say anything? Why argue about it? And it began to wear him out over a period of time. When he was tested, when he rubbed shoulders with them, he yielded to it, and the test showed that he had righteousness in his soul only, but not in his life. He was saved, but he was carnal. And because of that, Lot lost in the end. So this iterative imperfect tells us that. He was examined or tested by the touchstone. He was oppressed over a period of time, but in each installment, when he rubbed shoulders with those of Sodom and Gomorrah, instead of changing them, instead of making a spiritual difference in their life, instead of being the salt and keeping the sin at arm's length and trying to preserve it, he yielded to his circumstances over a period of time and helped bring about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Had he only maintained his righteousness, had he only insisted that the rest of his family and friends either trusted the Lord or didn't perform those godless deeds, it would have been different. But instead, because of his compromise, over a period of time, he had no influence. And that's the salt of the earth principle. When the salt has lost its potency, It's good for nothing. And so all God could do would say, look, I'm not going to judge you with these people. I'm going to remove you. But had you been what you should have been, Sodom and Gomorrah would not have fallen. But the pivot shrunk and came down basically to one man. All right, let's go to Genesis chapter 19. Genesis chapter 19. And we'll start here with verse number 12. Genesis 19, verse 12. And now we're going to read a lengthy portion, but it's real important. And with this and a few other comments, we'll close our study. And let's go back to this illustration here. What did Lot lose by compromising? See, that's the real question. Not only am I concerned about those that you care about, I'm concerned about you. Because in all actuality, Lot lost a lot. Excuse me. There's no pun intended there, but Lot lost a lot. Verse number 12. What did he lose? The men, the angels, said unto Lot, have you here any besides son-in-law, sons, daughters? Whatsoever you have in the city, bring them out of this place. You see, Lot had more family than what came out of Sodom. That's the point. At this time in his life, he had a bigger family with sons and daughters. They married and he had grandkids. But because he yielded to their thinking and the philosophy of Sodom was pervasive now, in not only in the area but in Lot's own family, and Lot knew better. He made a mistake in leaving Abraham, and he looked in his own greed. Well, man, look at that, the cities of the plain. It's as lush as the Garden of Eden. That's what it says in Genesis 13. We saw that. And Lot says, that's okay, Abraham, I don't want to stay with you and sacrifice. He pitched his tent towards Sodom. Okay? But the Bible qualifies it. The men of Sodom were sinners exceedingly. What's Lot going there? The only thing he can do is begin compromising, and that's just what he did. It hurt his soul, but eventually over a period of time, he yielded, gave in, compromised, shut his mouth, didn't say anything. Easier not to fight about it, and so forth. And as a result, Lot himself lost. Have you any of these in the city? Bring them out of this place. Why? We will destroy this place, verse 13, because a cry of them be waxen great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. Now again, we've already seen what that means. The noise, the decibel level was raised because of the increase of voices. Every single day, more and more people were reaching the saturation point of evil and being added to this group, protesting God because they were frustrated with life. Okay, God, why don't you satisfy me in that sense? But now, whether it's that type or the material lust and greed that we see today, especially around Christmas time, it doesn't make a difference. The sin is irrelevant to the point of people lending their voice in a collective way before the face of God, saying, God, I want more. I don't want you to tell me what to do with it, but I want more of the material things of life. I want more of what I think is going to satisfy me. Wake up Christmas morning, open the gifts. Oh, is that all? I want more. Johnny got this, and Susie got that, and I want more. So total dissatisfaction. So, what did Lot do? Lot went out and spake unto his sons-in-law, which married his daughters. I'm not exactly sure what the King James or Moses, the writer of Hebrews, had to add that. Of course, if it's a son-in-law, he married the daughter, but it adds it. And said, Up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. But he seemed as one that mocked into his sons-in-law. Why did it seem that Lot was mocking. Because up until this particular point, Lot never stood for anything in the eyes of his sons-in-law. That's the point. He lost his influence with his very own family, let alone his friends. Well, you're mocked. Angels came. You mean you saw angels? Oh, God going to destroy this place? Well, look, we are so prosperous. It's so beautiful here. I mean, this is our community, and this valley is ours, and we're enjoying it. And the kids are in school. You take them out of school and flee to the mountain. Oh, come on. Well, what's going to happen? And Lot said, no, you better. God's going to judge this place. They wouldn't listen to him. He had compromised over the course of time so much and so long that he mocked when he spoke, saying, it's going to happen. And I think we're at that point in the United States of America. The clarion call goes out. Judgment is coming. This world is not going to be here forever. Christ is going to come back. And yet it seems as though we're mocking people. What we need to have is a powerful witness in our own lives. Lot lost it. And lost his testimony. Verse 15. When the morning arose, the angels hastened, and Lot saying, arise, take your wife and your 2 daughters which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. And while he lingered, now see that? He didn't want to leave. He was carnal. He was both in the world, but he was of the world too. He wanted to go back. Jesus says, remember Lot's wife and remember Lot in using, he that puts his hand to the plow and turns back is not worthy of the kingdom. Now that's why there's going to be a stipulation here. Look, you're lingering, get busy. Finally, the angels, verse number 16, laid hold upon his hand and the hand of his wife and upon the hand of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought them forth and set them without the city. Finally, he said, we got to go. Time is up. You're going to be consumed with them, and we can't let that happen. So he brought them out, and it came to pass when they had brought them forth abroad, he said, escape for your life. But according to that principle, and it shows whether you're worldly and mindful of the world system or mindful of God and obedience to him. He that puts his hand to the plow and looks back. Don't look back. Don't care about the world. I know that's your family there, but it's too late for them now. You should have thought about it before you compromised. You should have thought about it before you sanctioned all of their activities and their gods. And it came to pass when they had brought them forth, escape, but don't look behind you. Stay in the plain, escape to the mountain, lest you are consumed. Not so, my Lord. If your servant has found grace in your sight, magnify thy mercy, which thou hast showed unto me by saving your life. I can't escape to the mountain lest some evil take me and I die. You see, he was more afraid of the bobcats up there than he was of the fire of Sodom. I don't know. There are snakes in them mountains. There are spiders up there. Don't let me go there. Behold now, the city is near. It's a little one, verse 20 says, let me escape thither. Is it not a little one, and my soul shall live? See, I have accepted thee concerning this thing, that I will not overthrow this city for the which thou hast spoken. In other words, I'll spare this one city. If you're afraid to go to the mountains, okay, this city is not so bad, go there. Haste, escape thither. I can't do anything till you're gone. So they went to the city, and it was named Zoar. Verse 23. The sun was risen upon the earth when Lot entered into Zoar. That was the protective city, the city of refuge for him. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah, brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven, and he overthrew those cities, all the plain, all the inhabitants of the cities, and that which grew upon the ground. Now, let's just take this apart here for a moment. The buildings were gone. All the plain, it was the fertile plain. Remember, it was as green as the Garden of Eden. It said all that which grew upon the ground. In other words, he took it right down and he burned it to a crisp so that no crops could be grown there anymore. And if you go to the Dead Sea area right now, you will see a place where you cannot grow crops because the Lord scorched the earth. But the middle part of the verse is the saddest part of all of it. All the inhabitants of the cities. Who were those inhabitants? The sons of Lot, the sons-in-law, the daughters-in-law, his grandkids, anybody else that was related to him. It was all gone. God destroyed his family because he had no witness and testimony, because over the course of time he had rubbed shoulders with them and they tested him and he did not make a difference. He compromised to the point where finally the pivot shrunk so small that God was forced to judge the city. Okay, let's read on. Verse number 26. But his wife looked back. In other words, he was so carnal that he did not even have a testimony to his own wife. And so his wife was carnal. And she looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. Now, the concept of sowing salt in land means that there is total non-production in the area where salt is strewn. Often Israel would do that. They'd come into a city and they'd level the city, and then the generals would take salt and just put it in the outer area so that crops could not be grown there for some time. And that's what this means, that she was unproductive and that her kind are not going to be productive. So she's turned into a pillar of salt. Abraham got up early in the morning to the place where he stood, and he looked towards Sodom and Gomorrah, and smoke of the country went up as the smoke of a furnace. And it came to pass, when God destroyed the cities of the plain, God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the city in an overthrow, when he overthrew the cities. Now, for the remaining moments that we have, we're going to look at the word overthrow. If you'll turn to Genesis chapter 3. Genesis chapter 3 and verse number 24. Hathach is the Hebrew. And what we're talking here is that though God may not send fire from heaven to destroy the United States of America, there are other ways that America can be overthrown. And I believe that we're in the process of that happening already. Verse number 24. He drove man out, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims, and a flaming sword which turned every way. Now, there is the word hathach, and it turns this way and that way, and that's what it means. It is an overthrow, a spinning around, a turning, an upheaval, a turning upside down. All right, let's look at 2 Kings chapter 21, where we have this same word. 2 Kings chapter 21, verse 13. Verse 13, rather, not 18, verse 13. And I will stretch over Jerusalem the line of Samaria and plummet the house of Ahab, and I will wipe Jerusalem as a man wipeth a dish, wiping it and turning it upside down. So, here's somebody that's drying a dish. Well, they use a man, a woman maybe, but it's a man here. And he takes a dish, and what do? Well, you've got one side of the dish. So you take the towel and or the cloth and cleaning it, and you clean the one side. But what do you have to be mindful of? That there might be a spill on the other side, and to be clean in the Orthodox sense, the whole plate had to be clean of anything that might corrupt and defile. So you turn the dish over and you wipe the backside as well. Front and back, front and back. There is a turning, the upheaval of it all. There's one more. Hosea chapter 7 and verse 8. This is all the same Hebrew word. What the Bible is doing is just giving us examples. Hosea chapter 7, verse 8. So we can picture in our mind what God did to Sodom and Gomorrah. Hosea 7, verse 8. Ephraim, he hath mixed himself among the people. Now, here it's in the negative, but the negative will help us to understand the positive aspect of it. Ephraim is a cake not turned, same Hebrew word, but when you have a pancake, what do you have to do in order to cook the thing thoroughly? You have to let it cook on one side, and then you have to pick it up and flip it over. There's the upheaval aspect of it. So it bakes on one side, it bakes on the other, so that it is thoroughly cooked. Now, the point here is that is how God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities of the plain. It was a thorough and a total upheaval, so that they were, excuse the phrase, baked through and through. It wasn't half done, it was totally done, totally cooked in the judgment that God sent their way. And what we need to be mindful of is that same warning stands for us. Let's maintain our salt status. Spirituality preserves not only us, but blessing by association, those around us. Lot is an example of one who lost his potency, and therefore he lost his testimony. So that when the judgment finally came, he couldn't even convince his own family that what he was saying was true. And they got judged. He was delivered, fine. But they got judged because of his incompetence, his compromise. And so as we have considered all of these things, just the warning goes out to us. During these times, let's enjoy the times as we can. Enjoy fellowship with family and friends. But always keep in mind, it must be qualified and limited to preserve our own spirituality and to protest graciously much of what goes on. And it's not just for our own benefit, it's for the benefit of those that we care about. Who knows? Our life could be that one that tips the scale in favor of God, withholding judgment long enough for that person to get saved. And that's what this lesson is all about.